Episode 2, Tape Measure Lottery.
December in Barton County didn't bother with being pretty. The sky over the neighborhood was the color of old dishwater, and the air had that cold, wet bite to it, like it couldn't make up its mind between rain or snow, so it just went with annoying. The wind wasn't strong enough to be a real problem, but every time it slipped under your jacket, it reminded you Ohio winters weren't a rumor. The garage was where you went when you didn't feel like arguing with the weather. The big door was rolled halfway up, letting in just enough of the gray to prove the outside still existed. Inside, the concrete was swept good enough, the truck sat off to one side, and the workbench was spread with the usual mix of tools. Coffee cans of screws, and things that had a purpose once and kept hanging around in case that purpose showed back up. Larson had claimed his spot near the little wall heater, sprawled on an old rug with his green sweater stretched across his back like it had shrunk out of self-defense. He snored in short bursts, the sound vibrating up through the floor like a lazy warning siren. Every once in a while, his paws twitched, like even in his dreams he was late getting to the food bowl. Frank sat in his usual folding lawn chair in the middle of it all, legs stretched out, a beer resting in his hand, and the empty cooler parked next to his boot. He wasn't in a bad mood, but he definitely wasn't in an ambitious one. It was that kind of Sunday. The side door from the house creaked open, bumped the stopper, and Ricky walked in like the cold had just lost a fight with him personally. He had a gray hoodie on, the zipper halfway up, and the sleeves shoved to his forearms, and a fresh beer already cracked. No hat. Ricky didn't do hats. His buzz cut and his hoodie carried all the personality he needed. "Feels like the air's mad at me," he said, taking a step onto the concrete. "Not snowing, not raining, just out there giving me attitude." Frank took a sip and smirked. "It's December in Ohio. That's the whole personality." Ricky looked around, took in the truck, the heater, the dozing dog, the workbench. "Garage looks good," he said. "This is premium hangout, climate control." "That's one way to sell a drafty door," Frank replied. A soft electronic chime came from behind him. Hudson slipped in next, pulling the side door shut with his foot. His phone was already in his hand, camera open, because somewhere along the line he'd decided everything was more bearable if it was content. He steadied the shot on the open door, the gray outside, then panned to the inside. "December 7th, he whispered, narrating for nobody and everybody. "Barton County. The sky's confused, the wind's petty, and the heater's doing the best it can with what it's got. We now go live to the Frank's Place garage, where absolutely nothing important is about to happen." Frank glanced over at him. "You making a documentary on my chair again?" "Season 2 bonus footage," Hudson said. "Behind the scenes of behind the scenes." Ricky tilted his beer toward the workbench. "What's all that?" he asked. Harry answered before anyone else, because the workbench belonged to him, whether his name was on it or not. "They're tape measures," he said, in that slow, dry way he always did. He was perched on his usual stool, shoulders relaxed, hands busy. In front of him, spread across the scarred wood top, were at least 8 tape measures. Some were wide and bright yellow, some were old and dull with the numbers faded. He had them lined up in a row, edges squared, like he was about to teach a class on them. Hudson turned the camera toward the bench. "Papa's building an army," he whispered, of cautious optimism. Ricky walked over and squinted down at them. "You starting a hardware store?" Harry pulled one a few inches out and let it snap back. "Just putting them where they belong," he said. "You boys leave them laying everywhere like snakes." "They look like snakes," Ricky said. "But they're destiny." He pointed at the row. "Look at that. That's not organization. That's a draft board." Frank shook his head. "You had one sip and you're already making it weird." The sound of boots on concrete came from the driveway. Doug ducked under the half-opened garage door, the brim of his cap just clearing the metal. He was wrapped in his usual trucker jacket, and in his hand was a plastic gas station cup so large it should have come with a building permit. The straw crunched ice as he took a pull. "Cold enough to sting your teeth out there," he said casually. "You're the one drinking frozen sugar in a bucket," Frank said. "It's a lifestyle," Doug replied. Hudson moved the camera toward him. "Here we have a wild Doug, fueled by citrus syrup and highway miles," he narrated softly. Migrates between truck stops in this garage. Refuses to acknowledge normal-sized drinks. Documentary boy's at it again, Ricky said, chuckling. Behind Doug, Marty slipped under the door. Shoulders hunched like he was sneaking into a movie he'd already bought tickets for. He held a beer in one hand and a tiny keychain tape measure in the other. Pink and useless. "This the line for the bad decisions raffle?" Marty asked, nudging Ricky with his elbow. Harry nudged one of the tape measures forward with his knuckles. The little pile of yellow and metal shifted like it was about to misbehave. "What are you really doing with those?" Doug asked. "Inventory," Harry answered. "Looks more like a draft," Marty said. He held up his little tape. "I brought the JV team." Ricky tapped his bottle on the bench. "Nah, no, don't undersell this. Papa. This is fate laid out in inches. Right here." Diane chose that moment to appear in the doorway from the house, a thin line of cigarette smoke slipping in ahead of her. She stepped down onto the concrete in her leggings and big sweatshirt, hair up, expression already past, tired. "If fate's in here, it better be holding a mop," she said. "What are y'all working yourselves up over now? Because if I hear one more idea today, I'm starting over on a new family." "Papa's turning tape measures into a lottery," Hudson said. "It's not a lottery," Harry said. "It is a lottery," Ricky said immediately. "You just don't know the rules yet." Harry pushed back his stool and stood up, joints popping once. "Before this becomes a circus, I gotta go pay my water bill," he said, and shuffled off toward the house. Diane watched him go and rolled her eyes. "He means he's going to the bathroom," she muttered. "Y'all start speaking English at some point today." Diane leaned on the end of the bench and looked down at the neat row. "If this ends with holes in my walls," she said, "there's going to be a different kind of drawing out here." Frank took another sip and settled deeper in his chair. "Want to hear this?" he said. "Go on, Ricky. The floor is yours." "The floor is always his," Harry called faintly from somewhere down the hall. Ricky straightened like he'd just been handed a microphone. "Okay," he said, gesturing with his bottle. "Here's how this works. Everybody picks a tape measure. You hook the end on the bench and pull it out as far as you can go without it bending and fouling over. When it snaps down, that's your number. Highest inches wins." "Inches of what?" Doug asked. "Glory," Ricky said. Diane let out a little huff. "Glory don't wash dishes," she said. "Depends where you grow up," Ricky fired back. "Where I grew up, Glory ate last and did the pots," Diane said. "Just so y'all know what's at stake in here." Hudson turned slightly, keeping everyone in frame. "This is either genius," he whispered to the lens, "or the dumbest thing we do all winter," which still puts it in the top 10. Frank nodded toward the bench. "All right," he said. "So what's the prize?" Ricky hesitated just long enough to prove he hadn't thought that far ahead. "Bragging rights," he said finally. "And, first pick on whatever Mama brought out to eat." Diane raised her brows. "You ain't betting my food on this circus." "Second pick," Ricky corrected without missing a beat. "Winner gets second pick in moral superiority." Mari pointed at his little pink tape. "Where does junior varsity place?" "JV gets moral support," Frank said. "Maybe a crumb." Harry reappeared and slid back onto his stool like he'd never left. "Only thing morally superior in this garage is that dog," he said. Larson let out a snore that sounded like a distant chainsaw and kicked one back paw. Doug took another drink and set his giant cup down again, careful not to hit any of the tape measures. "I'm in," he said. "I measure trailers all week. Might as well measure something that don't cost me paperwork." Frank looked at Harry. "You playin'?" Harry shrugged. "I'm already sitting here," he said. "Might as well lose at something new." Diane shook her head. "Y'all are unbelievable," she said, but there was a little smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. "If somebody knocks a drink over on that bench, I'm assigning chores like Santa with a temper." Hudson flipped the camera around to face himself for a second. "Live in the garage," he whispered. "Tape measure lottery. The stakes are non-existent. The pride is not." He flipped it back forward. "All right," he said. "Who's first?" Ricky slapped his palm on the bench. "I called it," he said. "This whole thing's my idea. I gotta set the mark. He grabbed one of the mid-sized tape stilo casing, 25-foot, old but not totally beat up, hooked the little metal end over the edge of the bench and pulled the blade out slow. The metal hissed as it slid. 10 inches, 15. The numbers ticked by in black and red. Go easy, Doug said. You're a man handling it. I know how to handle my tape, Ricky replied. At 20 inches, the blade started to bow just a little. Ricky lowered his hand, changing the angle, keeping the center as straight as he could. Look at him, Frank said. He's about to make this his whole personality. Already is, Diane said. Ricky kept pulling. 24 inches, 26. The little arc in the middle deepened. Come on, Hudson whispered, grinning as he zoomed in. Come on, come on. At 28 inches, the tape wobbled. Ricky held his breath. For one heroic second, it held. Then it buckled and slapped down flat with a sharp metal temps. He looked at the last visible number. 28, he announced. Put it on the board. Strong start, Doug said. Strongish. Frank said. Gravity's undefeated. Ricky pointed his tape at him. You go next then, coach? Frank sighed, pushed himself up out of the chair with his beer in his offhand, and picked up a different tape, a newer one with a wider blade. Always go with the one that ain't sick of being used, he said. He hooked it to the bench and pulled it out in one smooth motion, not as careful as Ricky, more like a man who just wanted to see what would happen. 12 inches, 20, 26. The tape bowed, but not as bad as the first. At 30, it started to sway. He took one more inch, maybe two, then it folded and dropped. 31, Hudson called out. Ricky held his hands up. He's only ahead because he stole my technique, he said. You panicked at 20, Frank said, heading back toward his chair. Harry slid one of the old, faded tapes toward himself. This one had seen some things. The hook was bent, and the numbers at the beginning were half worn off. You even sure that one works? Doug asked. Been here longer than you, Harry said. He hooked it, pulled it out in a single lazy motion to about 16 inches, then, before it could even bow, he let go. It flopped straight down. 16, Hudson said. That's not even... I know my limit, Harry said, picking his jar up again. No sense pretending otherwise. Diane laughed once, short and sharp. You hear that, Ricky? I'm offended, Ricky replied. I at least make the tape try. Doug stepped up, choosing a tape that looked almost brand new. This one's got truck stop energy, he said. Truck stop energy ain't a real thing, Ricky said. Sure it is, Doug answered. You don't sleep right, you live on caffeine, and you're always working one exit away from a breakdown. He pulled his tape out slow and steady. 10 inches, 20, 28, it held almost perfectly straight, the wide blade refusing to droop. At least he's gentle, Diane remarked. Years of practicing on door frames, Doug said. 34 inches, 36. The tape finally started to arc, but it fought it. Come on, Ricky said, leaning in. Come on now. At 38 inches, it dipped. At 40, the arc collapsed and it slapped the bench. Doug checked the number. 40, he said. Ricky dropped his head dramatically. There is no justice in Barton County, he said. Harry took a sip and shook his head. If a frog had wings, it wouldn't bump its ass every time it jumped, he said. But it don't, and you don't, so here we are. Hudson grinned, swinging the camera from face to face. Leaderboard, Doug, 40. Frank, 31. Ricky, 28. Papa, 16 by choice. Marty's still waiting on JV rules. Marty popped his little keychain tape out to about 6 inches just to prove it worked at all, then let it flop. I'm carrying the emotional support division, he said. You ain't playing? Diane asked Hudson. Hudson shook his head. I'm documenting, he said. Somebody's got to tell the story when all that's left is broken tapes and Pop-Tart crumbs. Pop-Tarts. Ricky perked up. Diane rolled her eyes. I brought Little Debbie's, she said. But if y'all knock 'em on the floor with this game, they're going in the trash and you're eating sadness for dessert. Harry pushed his stool back again. Speaking of sadness, he said, standing up, that water bill don't pay itself. He headed back toward the bathroom. Ricky watched him go. "Man's gonna have that thing on autopay by bedtime," he said. They went another round, swapping tapes, trying different styles. Ricky tried pulling fast. The tape folded at 20. Frank tried pulling slow. His bowed much earlier and dropped at 27. Harry tried again and stopped at 10 inches like before. "Consistent," he said simply. Doug, without fanfare, hit 39 on his second pull and shook his head. "Can't beat 40, he said. That one was blessed. Larson snorted awake halfway through the third round, blinked at the bench, then at the men hunched over it, and finally got up and waddled over to sniff a tape that had fallen on the floor. "Don't you chew that?" Diane warned. Larson shifted his focus to Doug's cup instead. "Same, buddy," Ricky murmured. "Same." Eventually, the game just sort of deflated, like everything else in the garage. It didn't so much end as it ran out of momentum. Frank sank back into his chair. Ricky leaned against the workbench again, beer in hand. Doug reclaimed his soda and his corner. Harry started gathering the tape measures up, stacking them, hooking their ends, returning them to the confusing but familiar order he liked. Marte tucked his little tape back in his pocket like it had done its job just by existing. Diane opened a box of snacks on the small table by the wall and handed out cakes and chips with the re-sign efficiency of someone who'd spent her life feeding people who never stopped acting surprised food showed up. She muttered, "Glory still ain't doing these dishes," under her breath, but she passed Ricky a cake anyway. Hudson backed up a little, framing them all in one shot, the half-open door. The gray sky outside, the men scattered across the garage in their usual places, Larson planted near the heater, Diane leaning on the table, smoke curling lazily toward the rafters, Marty half-humming some half-written song. He lowered his voice for the sign-off, because that's how these things went. "First Sunday of December," he whispered into the mic. "Weather can't decide what it wants to be. Cowboys will probably blow it later. Papa organized 8 tape measures just to let gravity prove a point. Doug's, the reigning champ of inches, nobody needed measured. Ricky still swears it was rigged. Marty brought JV tape to a varsity problem, and Dad. He turned the camera just enough to catch Frank lifting his beer slightly and a quiet little cheers. Dad's just glad everybody's here." Hudson let the shot linger on the garage yawn, the heater hum, on Larson's sweater, on the row of tapes now sitting still, on Diane's tired smirk, on Marty's little keychain tape catching a bit of light, on Doug's giant drink sweating beside the bench. Then he whispered the part that always mattered most, short and heavy and simple. One tape measure lottery. One cold Sunday, warmed up by bad math and good company. This was life at Frank's place.
Well, if you made it all the way to the end, either you really liked the story, or your phone fell asleep before you did. Either way, I appreciate you. For the full Frank's Place episodes, previews, and miniseries, follow us on Facebook. That's where all the chaos lies. And for the full audiobook versions, subscribe to the Frank's Place YouTube channel, where the stories run longer than Harry's one-liners. This is Life at Frank's Place.